Welcome to Days of Roar, the Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold, coming off an interesting week, better than we think. Why don't you recap it for us, Ev?
Yeah, better than we think, but still not great. I mean, it was a 3-3 record. They went 2-1 against the Seattle Mariners at T-Mobile Park, and then 1-2 against the San Francisco Giants at Oracle Park. Look, the Tigers are 13.5 games back of first place in the division. They're 9.5 games back of the final AL wildcard spot. So, like the American League Central standings, yeah, the Tigers are down there, and they're way behind the Cleveland Guardians and the Minnesota Twins and the Kansas City Royals. But I thought they did a good job of going into Seattle, winning the first two games. You know, they lost the third game, and it was a close one, walk-off fashion. You know, and then they lose in San Francisco, also on walk-off fashion. And those are both bummers, you know, to lose those games, because that was a situation where the Tigers could have gone 5-1 on the 6-game West Coast trip. But instead, it's a 3-3 record. So sure, better than they would have liked to play, but they still let a couple of them slip away. It was good to see him get that win against the Giants, obviously, to wrap up the series on Sunday. But yeah, 13.5 back in the AL Central, 9.5 games back of the final AL wildcard spot. It's interesting when you look at the AL Central and where teams are at right now. Cleveland Guardians got them at 69-49. They've been slipping over the last week. Minnesota Twins at 65-52. They're trailing the Guardians by 3.5 games. Then you have the Kansas City Royals at 65-53. They trail the Guardians by 4 games. And after that, there's that significant drop-off. There's the Tigers at 56-63 at this point in the season, 43 games left to play. And then the Chicago White Sox all the way down at 28-91. Shout out to the White Sox, by the way, Mark. We got to throw that out there. They snapped a 21-game losing streak by winning Tuesday against the Oakland Athletics. I did some research on that. The 21 losses tied for the longest losing streak in AL history with the 1988 Baltimore Orioles. The longest losing streak in MLB's modern era, by the way, belongs to the Philadelphia Phillies in 1961 with 23 losses in a row. So White Sox win a game. Since then, they've lost 3 games in a row, so now they're working on a new losing streak. Also, by the way, in AL Central news, the White Sox fired their manager, Pedro Grifol, on Thursday, just 2 days after snapping the losing streak. Grady Sizemore, a former all-star outfielder who I compared to Riley Green because of the elite talent and the injury issues, has taken over as the interim manager for the rest of the season, and we'll see who the White Sox end up bringing in. But that's what's going on around the AL Central. As for the Tigers, you know, this past week, it was some ups, some downs. I think, Mark, we got to go back and talk about what happened in Wednesday's game against the Seattle Mariners when Parker Meadows had the game-saving home run robbery in center field. Play of the week, no doubt about it. Maybe catch of the year. Like, I wouldn't put it past them for that to be named catch of the year, because that was a beautiful play in center field, and it saved the Tigers. It saved the Tigers. It was 8th inning. Parker Meadows essentially robs what would have been a go-ahead 2-run home run from Cal Raleigh, who had homered off Tarek Skubal earlier in the game. Jason Foley throws his arms in the air. Obviously, you know, Parker Meadows, he pumps his fist as he has the ball in the webbing of his glove. And the Tigers end up going on to win that game. But it would have been a go-ahead 2-run home run for the Mariners. Instead, Parker Meadows robs it. The Tigers end up winning 6-2 because they score some runs in the 9th inning. That was the highlight of the week. But yeah, like you said, some ups and some downs, maybe a little bit better than it actually looks with a 3-3 record.
First of all, catch of the week, catch of the year. There'll be no better catch in baseball in 2024 than Parker Meadows rising a good 4 feet above the fence height to grab what would likely have been a game-winning 2-run homer off the bat of Cal Raleigh. Come on, dude. That catch will go down in, you know, Tiger annals. It might be the catch of the damn decade.
His armpit was at the top of the wall. He got up.
You know, how we all analyze catches now, and with the capacity to measure things, I'm still a little confused why we have not seen the total vertical of a 6'5" talented athlete at full extension stealing a home run. I'm curious how far off the ground he caught that baseball. It was pretty awesome, and, you know, pretty much explained what may be the best week of Parker Meadows' career. He was nothing short of spectacular pretty much every time he laced them up this week, both in the field and at the plate. He, you know, showing us what we had hoped we would see a lot in 2024. Unfortunately, April and injuries have derailed that, but I think it does explain why it's going to be tough to dislodge him from center field if this is a remnant of anything of the style of play he can put up. As far as the week, 3-3 on a West Coast trip. Normally you don't complain about that too much. Should have been 5-1. It speaks to where the Tiger bullpen has been probably since the 1st of May, and it is what it is. So, all right, let's jump into question one of the big two. How much should we read into the final 6 weeks of the season with all the injured players returning soon? We've touched on this topic before. It's something of debate. Give me your 2 cents on this one, beat writer, and let's see where we go with it.
Yeah, so first we got to talk about the guys coming back. Outfielder Kerry Carpenter, he's got a lumbar spine stress fracture. He should be activated from the injured list for Tuesday's game following a 4-game rehab assignment with AAA Toledo. If that happens, Tuesday will be Kerry Carpenter's first game for the Tigers since May 26th. He'll be a much, again, this is something the Tigers have been needing, right? They've been missing Kerry Carpenter, the left-handed bat against right-handed pitchers. It's as good of a left-handed bat against right-handed pitchers as you're going to get. And Tigers have missed him. So Kerry Carpenter coming back, that's going to be huge. Hopefully he's able to hit the ground running. Hopefully there's not a ton of time that's going to be needed for him to get the timing of his swing. Because again, we're pushing on the final 6 weeks of the season. And if it takes him, 2-3 weeks to get his timing down, you're looking at only 3 weeks left in the season. But nonetheless, Kerry Carpenter's coming back. That's an impact bat in the middle of the lineup. That's huge for the Tigers. Outfielder Riley Green, right hamstring strain. He could begin his rehab assignment Tuesday with AAA Toledo. Seems like that's the plan for him, starting his rehab assignment with the Mud Hens on Tuesday. He ran the bases Sunday in San Francisco. Seems ready to go. Tigers are going to be super cautious with him because of the lower body injury history, specifically with his legs. But barring a setback, I can't imagine he needs more than a week playing 4 of 6 games like Kerry Carpenter did in that week block in the minor leagues. So look, if Green doesn't return over the weekend, you got to think he's going to be back at the beginning of next week on August 20th for the series opener against the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field. He hasn't played for the Tigers since July 25th. Riley Green obviously is the straw that stirs the drink. He's the guy, the heart and soul of the Tigers. Riley Green is Riley Green. The Tigers need him back, and they missed him. They've missed him. And thankfully, Cole Keith was able to step up for a significant stretch there in Riley Green's absence. But it's going to be nice to see both Riley Green and Kerry Carpenter back in the lineup. As for Casey Mize, right-handed pitcher, coming back from a left hamstring strain, he completed the first of what could be 4 starts on his rehab assignment with AAA Toledo. He's scheduled to start again Tuesday, so we could be seeing both Riley Green and Casey Mize in the lineup on Tuesday for AAA Toledo. In his first start, Mize completed 2 1/3 innings on 35 pitches. That's where his workload volume is at this point. He worked around 3 hits and 1 walk with 2 strikeouts. He generated 6 whiffs on 15 swings with 3 fastballs, 2 splitters, and 1 sinker. His fastball averaged 95 miles an hour and maxed out at 98 miles an hour. Those were all good signs. The Tigers are going to now build the innings limits. And again, they're going to build the innings for him. But again, remember, Casey Mize is not eligible to return to the Tigers until August 30th. No matter how good he looks, he will not be back in a Tigers uniform until August 30th because the Tigers put him on the 60-day injured list. They transferred him from the 15 to the 60-day to clear a spot on the 40-man roster, so Casey Mize will not be able to come back until August 30th. As for the question you asked, I'm not reading too much into the last 6 weeks of the season. I think the final 6 weeks are important for fringe guys, so pretty much everyone in the bullpen aside from Tyler Holton and Will Vest. I'm looking to see how does Cater Montero develop as a starting pitcher. Dylan Dingler, can he get comfortable behind the plate and at the plate in the big leagues? Let's see how Bly Madris bounces back from a brutal 6-game road trip in which he had 2 hits and 18 at-bats with 2 walks and 7 strikeouts. And then the big one, we were talking about him at the top of the show. I need to continue to evaluate Parker Meadows because I love Parker Meadows. I think Parker Meadows is a guy that can be a real difference maker on this team moving forward, not only in 2025, but in 26, 27, 28, and years to come. I think Parker Meadows is the guy I'm reading into the most. I want to see how he performs. I don't really care about Tarek Skubal, Colt Keith, Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, Matt Vierling, Tyler Holton, Will Vest, guys like that, because you know what you're getting from them at this point. I know Parker Meadows is going to be a dude in center field, but I want to know if he can be a dude at the plate. Because if he can, that changes everything about the way I feel about the Tigers going into 2025. Look, the Tigers have a 25-16 record this season when Parker Meadows plays. Is that a coincidence? Maybe.
Hell no.
Maybe not, though, right? Exactly. So let's find out in the final 6 weeks, because if this guy, he's a complete difference maker with the glove already. When he's hitting, he's a difference maker with the bat. So that's the big question, right? Like, does he keep on hitting? When the Tigers sent him down back in early May, he was hitting .096 in 32 games. Since returning from AAA Toledo, Meadows is hitting .378 with 1 walk and 7 strikeouts in 9 games. So is Parker Meadows a .096 hitter? Probably not. Is Parker Meadows a .378 hitter? No way. So who is Parker Meadows, and what can the Tigers expect from him in the 2025 season? That's what I'm reading into, and I think we'll get a clear picture by the time the season ends. He's going to be 25 in early November. We need to know what Parker Meadows is going to be. Here's my suggestion. Tigers should just put him in the leadoff spot and let him get as close to 200 plate appearances as possible from now until the end of the season. You got 43 games left. Bat him in the leadoff spot. Get him as close to 200 plate appearances as possible from this point forward. And we'll see what we got in Parker Meadows. I think it's a good way to evaluate him and someone that I have my eye on because I love what he brings. But the question is, how consistent can he be? And if he can be consistent, he's a really dangerous player. That's what I'm watching for.
To remind everybody, we've talked about Parker Meadows, his possible offensive production. We've always both thought it was somewhere bottom side 235, high side 260, 15 plus homers, 25 plus steals, maybe an 8.5 to 9.5% walk rate. Putting him at leadoff for the last 50 games, great idea. As many ABs as possible. Not sure that's where he belongs for the entirety of a season, but hell yes for right now. Every at bat he can get. I mean, what do these games really mean anymore? So let's try to use them to find out what kind of hitter Parker Meadows is. As far as the rest, players coming back, I would be shocked if Riley's not back Friday night. Glad to see Kerry Carpenter coming back in more of a semblance of a Major League Baseball team and out on the field for the Detroit Tigers. It'll be a welcome change. This has been a brutal 6-7 weeks of minor leaguers playing in the major leagues. Question 2, the big 2. What does the starting rotation in the bullpen look like on opening day 2025? I want to go over this because I think there's some questions and there's going to be some blanks filled in. The rotation is an interesting question and discussion we have to have, especially based on how Scott Harris has approached the past 2 off seasons. And we're going to find out how serious they are about winning in 2025, because after 2023 and 2024, assume that they should try to be a little bit more intent on winning in 2025. So what do you think the rotation looks like starting April 1st, 2025, Evan?
That's such a tough question because obviously we got all free agency to get through. But when you look at where the starting rotation is at now with only 2 starters in Tarik Skubal and Kader Montero, it's not going to look like that on 2025 opening day. It better not, or people are going to be calling for Scott Harris's job. But look, like I think it's probably Tarik Skubal, Jackson Jobe, Reese Olson, someone to fix on a 1-year contract, and then a competition between guys like Kenta Maeda, Casey Mize, Sawyer Gipson-Long, Kader Montero, Matt Manning, Ty Madden, Brant Herter, all for that final spot, with probably 2 of those guys ending up in a bullpen role. Of that group, I think I like Gipson-Long winning a rotation spot with Maeda and Mize moving to the bullpen, but that's just me. I think it's easy to say Gipson-Long because he's the one we haven't seen. So it's easy just to say, oh yeah, he'd be great. But who really knows? He might be, he might as well get rocked, in his return from, 2 surgeries, both the hip and then also the elbow. So who knows what you're going to really get from Sawyer Gipson-Long. He might even need more time. So I don't even know if he's going to be able to make the opening day roster next season. So that's kind of a toss-up, like who makes the last rotation spot. Well, there's going to be a huge competition in spring training, I'm sure, and we'll see who ends up grabbing it. I think Kader Montero needs more time in AAA Toledo to work on his command as a starter, but I think he has starter stuff. It's just about locating it more often and improving the consistency there. So yeah, who knows? I think, speaking of someone to fix, right? I wonder if the Tigers could fix Walker Buehler. That's a crazy name, I know, but maybe. He would certainly be a candidate for a 1-year contract as a result of multiple injuries. He recovered from his second Tommy John surgery, but he has a 5.84 ERA with 10 walks and 31 strikeouts in 37 innings this season for the Dodgers. also has a right hip injury that currently has him on the injured list, but he's being activated this week, so we'll get to see some Walker Buehler down the stretch for the Dodgers. The Tigers, thanks to President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris, have asserted themselves as kind of a destination for starting pitchers to sign one-year contracts to improve and then return to free agency in search of a bigger payday. Examples being Michael Lorenzen and then obviously Jack Flaherty, who's looking for a pretty significant payday this upcoming offseason. Maybe Walker Buehler is next. That's just a quick idea. He's a big name. A lot of people know him. And I'm sure he'd be interested in joining the Tigers based on the Tigers' track record of helping pitchers get better. But I'm sure, Mark, there are other free agents we can discuss once we get into the offseason. That's just a name that I think is kind of interesting. So yeah, I don't know. Tarek Skubal, Jackson Jobe, Reese Olson, someone to fix, and then a big competition for the last spot. I don't feel great about that. I feel great about 1, 2, and 3, but I'm not so sure about, someone to fix. I guess you can hang your hat on Scott Harris's track record and say, okay, you're going to have 4 pretty good starters, and there's going to be this competition, and maybe you find a diamond in the rough, and Montero eventually develops. Maybe he puts it all together over the offseason. He comes back and, he has plus command of what is plus stuff. That's a real pitcher right there. That is a number 3, number 4 pitcher. If Kader Montero can have a plus command of plus stuff, right now he has below average command. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with the rotation. It still feels like a toss-up to me, though. It's so early.
Tarek Skubal, Reese Olson, Kader Montero's a lock. He's Reese Olson-like. Okay. Casey Mize is a lock. If we've learned anything about Scott Harris, the 5th starter, that's going to be likely, based on resume, somebody they bring in. Jackson Jobe, I'm sure they'll suppress his service time and not bring him up until God knows when next year. Doesn't matter.
How do you think Tarek Skubal is going to feel about that? The guy becomes a free agent after the 2026 season. In 2025, he maybe feels like he has a chance, and the Tigers are going to turn around and send Jackson Jobe to AAA. What are you telling to the ace of your staff? That's I don't like that, man. I don't like that idea at all. I know you don't either, but that's what they might do.
Well, my answer to things now with Scott Harris is resume. So look how they treated Casey Mize, $25,000, demoting him for an extra 2 weeks for no reason. It's just how they roll, dude. So I've said many times, I've tweeted this. They have org meetings in October. I don't expect them to be real, kumbaya-ish. What's gone on this year is pretty amateurish, to be really honest with you. It's not a Major League Baseball team. It hasn't been run like a Major League Baseball team. And at some point in time, when you have a giant, beautiful, new season ticket, home plate club rolling out and nobody buys the tickets, the ownership is going to start asking, why are fans so disinterested in this baseball team? And I think when that time comes, from a business standpoint, they'll have some reasons if they just pay attention to what went on this year. All right, let's get to the bullpen. What do you think about the bullpen, which is filled with tons of guys that should be pitching the 5th, 6th, maybe the 7th inning? Nobody to close, really nobody to pitch leverage anymore besides Tyler Holton. Talk to me about what you're seeing. And look, let's be really honest about this. If you follow baseball for a long time, bullpens are a very mercurial thing. Same guys next year could be great. Last year, a lot of them were pretty good. This year, they have been abysmal. So let's talk about how to fix it. We tried to get them to sign a closer and warned everybody about this last winter. What do you think the plan is for next year?
Mark, you mentioned the volatility of relievers. That's why I need to tip my cap to Tyler Holton. This is a guy who had a 2.11 ERA last season. He has a 2.70 ERA this season. He's been absolute nails back-to-back years. Deserves a lot of credit for that because it's hard to do that, especially as a reliever. As for what the bullpen actually looks like, I'm almost just as confused about the bullpen, if not more confused about the bullpen than I am about what the rotation actually looks like. If we're talking about a traditional, 8-man bullpen, I'll take Kenta Maeda, Casey Mize, Tyler Holton, Will Vest, Jason Foley, Alex Fido. That leaves 2 open spots for maybe Shelby Miller if the Tigers pick up his $4.25 million club option. Not sure that's happening. And then someone else, either internally or externally. The last 2 spots, as always, are pretty much toss-ups. I don't have a lot of faith in the Tigers bullpen right now. After all, this is a bullpen that ranks 24th in MLB with a 4.60 ERA in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings since the All-Star break. And across the entire season, the Tigers bullpen ranks 18th in MLB with a 4.16 ERA. Not great. Here's what I do know, though. I like the bullpen a lot better, and I mean a lot better. If Casey Mize, who already hits 98 miles an hour, can throw 100 miles an hour as a reliever, accompanied by a swing and miss splitter, I would feel so much better. And you know what? Toss in the slider, too. But again, that's been a pitch that he struggled, getting consistency with. I would love Casey Mize as a reliever. The Tigers don't have enough guys in the bullpen that throw hard. You got Jason Foley, but he doesn't miss bats. Casey Mize with that, rising fastball that he throws, you can run that thing up to 100 miles an hour. I think that looks pretty interesting in the back end of a bullpen, if you ask me. And I'm not sure if he's built to be a starter. You look at the performance that he's had when he's had opportunities to start the season. It hasn't been great. I still think you probably move forward with him thinking probably a starter. But I think back-end reliever is an interesting fallback option for Casey Mize. That's something that I'm going to kind of be monitoring because I think it's fascinating. But yeah, like Kenta Maeda, Tyler Holton, Will Vest, Jason Foley, Alex Faedo. Not great. It's really not.
Not great. So the guy that I think they'll convert to the bullpen after this season is one Matt Manning. That's the guy.
Yeah.
So, as far as the bullpen, hey, look, I don't think, part of the magic of AJ Hinch, if people can remember it, because it's been so long ago that he had pieces to move around on the chessboard, but he's a great manager of a bullpen. I can't think he's too happy about what's transpired this year, and that'll be a point of emphasis in their org meeting in October. I expect to see one or two signings or deals for bullpen pieces of some substance. Camilo Doval in San Francisco, who throws 100 and seems to offend everybody in San Francisco. He'd be a guy I'd be making a few phone calls to Scott Harris's former boss, Farhan Zaidi, about. That'd be something I'd want to talk about, to say the least. I think that project is well worth discussing. But you want to have a good baseball team for AJ Hinch, you got to have a better bullpen. This is just a mess. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Nate Schwartz of PitcherList to discuss hitters and Process Plus.
All right, I'd like to welcome Nate Schwartz, a research analyst who works as a writer for PitcherList, to the Days of Roar podcast for the first time. He is our third guest from PitcherList, following Nick Pollock and Scott Chu. Nate is here to talk about Process Plus, a new all-encompassing hitting stat created by Kyle Bland, PitcherList's Director of Analytics. It seems to provide a look into a player's underlying approach at the plate, but we'll dig more into that. Nate, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Definitely happy to be here and talk about how it affects some Tigers hitters.
Yeah, no doubt. So first off, just to get started, can you tell us what is Process Plus?
Yeah, so Process Plus is a combination of PLV's decision value, contact, and power metrics formatted into one holistic number. PLV is pitch level value, a statistic also created by Kyle Bland at PitcherList last year. It essentially says how many runs above average were created in any situation. So, for example, a double hit on a hanging curveball is going to be less runs above average than a double hit on a 98-mile-an-hour fastball on the corner. But PLV doesn't just record batted ball events, it records every single pitch. So we could determine how good is a player at making swing decisions or making contact and then hitting for power. So Process Plus is a combination of our three stats from those three pillars of hitting combined into one put on a scale where 100 is league average, similar to OPS plus or WRC plus. The easiest way to understand it when looking at the numbers is that it's expected WRC plus on a pitch level.
So I think that's interesting too. So like in the simplest terms, how can fans understand Process Plus, right? Because I read in your story, and you wrote it, the title of the story was "What is Process Plus?" And it basically that it's a per pitch expected WRC plus, thus explaining which players create the most runs with the aspects of hitting they have the most control over on each pitch, if I'm understanding that correctly. And those aspects include swing decisions, contact ability, exit velocity, launch angle, all relative to the quality of the pitches that they're facing. Now, we've talked about WRC Plus on this show a lot. For a reminder to our listeners, WRC Plus quantifies run creation and adjusts it so we can compare players from different ballparks, different eras. League average is always 100. So, for example, Cole Keith's 94 WRC Plus across the entire 2024 season means his offensive performance is 6% below league average, whereas Colt Keith's 120 WRC plus since May 1st means that his offensive performance is 20% above league average over the last 3.5 months. That's how WRC plus works. So Nate, how did you end up with Process Plus as a per pitch expected WRC plus? And as a second part to that question, how is Process Plus different than just like the regular WRC plus that fans look at when they go on Fangraphs?
So to answer the first part of your question, that comes from PitcherList Director of Analytics, Kyle Bland, when he created it. Because pitch level value is on a per pitch basis, it grades everything, pitch by pitch. Any data set kind of built off of that also comes off of a per pitch level. To answer the second question and how it is different than just regular WRC plus, Process Plus is the underlying skills that should reflect WRC plus. Similar to how Stuff Plus describes the underlying metrics of any given pitch that a pitcher throws, Process Plus looks under the hood of hitters to see how they should be performing. When we ran kind of the correlations, it was really interesting to see that Process Plus actually outperforms WRC Plus in predicting next year's WRC Plus, showing that if you're showing the underlying skills to be a good hitter, there's a better chance that that's going to come through rather than maybe getting lucky on, a few extra homers that get out of the ballpark that WRC Plus shows, but Process wouldn't.
All right, Nate, to simplify this for less sophisticated fans, I'll break it down into what they're used to watching. Take 3 guys, Justin Henry Malloy and Riley Green, typically should do well in this metric because their patience level and swing decisions at swinging at strikes or swinging at hittable pitches has typically been pretty high, correct?
Yes. And I think, go ahead.
And at the other end of the spectrum is everybody's favorite wild swinger, one Javi Baez. He typically would register most of the time, especially with 2 strikes, pretty low on the spectrum at the quality of pitches he's swinging at, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So continue. I just wanted to give some context so people understood what we're trying to measure.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really important parts, that it's on a scale like OPS plus or WRC plus. As long as you kind of understand what it's showing you, and Process Plus is indicating the process, we can see that, Colt Keith being like a very good hitter and say he has a 120 Process Plus since May 1st, that can tell you that he's 20% better than league average. And I think it's a very easy way to look at the one number rather than having to click over, 3 different websites to find 5 different stats to see how a player's performing. This is just one simple one that hopefully gives the look under the hood to how should he be doing.
So it combines both the quality of their swing decision and the quality of their contact when they make that swing decision.
Yes, and how good they are at making contact. So you start with the decision value, how good is the decision to swing on a pitch given, where it is in the zone, pitch quality. Then are they making contact with it or not? And then, as you said, how is the batted ball event? What is the contact quality?
Okay, so let's take that to the Detroit Tigers and share with Evan and I, who seemingly is making good swing decisions and successful quality of contact as opposed to who is not.
Yeah, so unsurprisingly, Riley Green is by far and away the best hitter on the Tigers in that metric. Before he got hurt, he had a 116 Process Plus, which is 48th among hitters who had seen 400 pitches, which is the threshold we use for reliability. He makes really good decisions and has good power and pairs that with only around average contact. But when you're making good decisions and hitting for power, you've given yourself a floor to whiff. And one of the really interesting things was right before he got injured, he was starting to make above average contact. So I think there might be another level for Riley Green to get into. On the other side, Javi Baez, unsurprisingly, is, at the bottom. He's actually a really interesting exercise in Process Plus because he actually makes a lot of contact. It's just the decisions that are by far and away the worst in baseball. When he's swinging at the pitch where you see the catcher set up in the left-handed batter's box, no one's expected to hit that pitch. But deciding to hit that pitch or even attempt to is what docks him so much. So those two are the main guys on either end of the spectrum.
So let's dig into some of these individual players. Colt Keith, we mentioned him a couple of times since he jumped on with us. Colt Keith is a big name, for Tigers fans, right? Signed a big contract, 6 years, $28.6 million, and maxes out at 9 years, $82 million. He had the slow start in March and April, but he's hitting .282 with 11 home runs since May 1st. It hasn't always been pretty, but he's always making these little swing adjustments to get himself back on track. What does Process Plus tell you about Colt Keith specifically?
So we have him at a 103 Process Plus, so 3% above league average, which comes from a high contact ability, while the power and decisions have been subpar. But that subsect of high contact and bad power and decisions really comes from earlier in the year when he was not really getting into much power and striking out a lot. Since he turned his season around, the decisions and power, unsurprisingly, have gotten exponentially better, while the contact ability has actually gotten worse. So what that means is he's actually doing more damage to pitches he wants to do damage to, which is exactly what you're looking for a guy with his scouting report. So it's really neat to see that, it's not you have to do well at everything. He's making trade-offs, and he found a trade-off that worked.
That's awesome to hear, first and foremost. Another player that's getting all kinds of attention right now is Parker Meadows. He was a train wreck out of the gate. Got sent to AAA Toledo in early May, and then got called back up. And he got a hit in each of his first 8 games before going 0 for 4 in Sunday's game. What does Process Plus tell you about Parker Meadows? And what do you think we can expect from him at the plate moving forward, not only for the rest of this year, but into kind of the rest of his career into 2025?
Yeah, so overall, an underwhelming 76 Process Plus that comes from the struggles early in the year. But he was making league average decisions. And recently, as he's come back up, we've seen him been making much better contact in the last 2 weeks. And I think you can see that's been reflected with a 385 average in August. So I think going forward, he has struggled, but if he's already starting to improve his contact and can get into just a little bit of power, I think he has a good chance to kind of maybe turn into the breakout a lot of people saw coming into the season. He's starting to improve. I think the time in AAA really helped him. And I think, just seeing the steady improvements is really great to see at the end of the year, and hopefully can give him momentum going into 2025.
So, Nate, basically, I'm curious, does this particular statistic give you an idea of guys that maybe make pretty solid, if not at least league average decisions on what to swing at, but maybe make subpar contact once they do? So it kind of explains why lots of players are so streaky. They understand what to swing at. They just don't make good contact all the time when they do. To me, a guy like that on the Detroit Tigers, who's been around for a while and does have hot streaks, is a guy like Jake Rogers. It seems like he swings at good pitches. He just doesn't hit them hard very often. Why don't you share if my guess about that has any level of accuracy, or maybe he's hitting 190 for a reason?
Yeah, so Jake Rogers makes poor contact, lots of whiffs, and I think that's why he's struggled to put the bat on ball. But he's actually had pretty good power throughout the year. He makes above average decisions, and having the power, it's good, not great. So I think, not being able to put bat to ball has hurt him from really putting something productive together. But what you were talking about, I did want to bring this back to Justin Henry Malloy, who makes exceptional decisions, but really is not hitting for any contact or power. So he's a guy you don't necessarily see in the stat sheet filling everything up because the decisions are good, but it seems like there is something there. If he's got the head to be swinging at the right decisions, an off season to fix some contact issues or potentially grow into some power would be absolutely massive for him.
So yeah, Justin Henry Malloy is interesting for me because I think he's faced exactly 800 pitches in his MLB career now. And I don't really know what to think about him because, look, he can't play anywhere other than designated hitter because he really struggles in the outfield. He's hitting .207 with 8 home runs and a .696 OPS in 62 games. He runs a 19% chase rate, which is elite. That's great. But he also has a terrible 36% whiff rate and a 35% strikeout rate. He's an in-zone swing and miss machine, doesn't run well, can't play outfield. But again, he makes these really good decisions. So Nate, when you're looking at that, does that tell you, hey, it's a swing adjustment that he needs to make to be able to tap into more contact, just to like get the ball in play more often because the swing decisions are so good? And then also too, like, I don't know, like, is there a power issue as well? Someone from the Tigers organization told me back in late July that basically they felt like, Justin Henry Malloy was hitting a home run every other night. And they might have been joking because he hasn't homered since the beginning of the month. The power is not really there. It's just, I'm curious, like, what can this guy actually be? And what does Process Plus tell you? And does it help you understand maybe what are the steps for him to become an MLB regular DH if that's his only spot? Like, does it help you like find the pathway for him to being an everyday productive player?
I think first and foremost, in order to be a productive player with such a defensive limitation basically anywhere, you have to be a really good hitter. It doesn't matter what lineup you're in. If you're not going to provide defensive value, you have to be an impact bat to make it worthwhile. And while it seems like the decisions are there, it's really the contact that's kind of tapered off since he stopped homering early into his MLB tenure. And I think that does potentially come with, some mechanical changes or some sort of change to actually hit big league pitching, because the mental stuff seems to be in there. He's finding the right pitches to attack. Maybe that's a little too passive, but there's a lot of whiff to his game. And if he can correct that just a little bit and get a little more bat and ball, I feel like he's a guy where the power comes with that. He is a kind of a guy with a rhythm, and he starts putting the ball in play a little more. I think the power comes with it. So it'll be curious to see what he does in his offseason, what he comes back with. But I think the Tigers should absolutely give him kind of the early track in 2025 to see how he gets going, but not be quick to pull the plug.
Wenceel Pérez, another name, is a guy who's a rookie, suffered a left oblique strain over the weekend, could be out for the season, but he kind of came out of nowhere this year. He's hitting, 242, 9 home runs, 27 walks, 76 strikeouts in 97 games. He's hitting 230 since June 1st, as well as 200 in his last 33 games, but he's come up with some clutch hits along the way and seems to have cemented himself into at least a utility role heading into 2025. Young, switch hitter. He's improved a lot in the outfield on defense. What does Process Plus tell you about Wenceel Pérez? Maybe what are the next steps for him to go from being a utility guy to a regular?
Yeah, so he's a really interesting case. Again, 97 Process Plus, just around league average. And he started out the year very, very strong. He was making good contact and around league average decisions and league average power. And then once we got into June and July, the decisions and power just completely tanked. So for a guy like that, I'm really curious, was he hurt before as the power just sapped him throughout the year and he tried to compensate by overswinging and making contact, and that just really hurt him before fully getting hurt? I think we saw early in the year what the path forward for him is and how he can be a regular, but he played for such a significant time where he really kind of put up an offer in the Tigers lineup that, as you said, I think a utility role is probably where he's going to start out next year.
I know you mentioned Riley Green being at the top of the list for the Tigers. We love us some Riley Green when he's healthy. First-time All-Star this season, hitting 264 with 17 home runs, 51 walks, 109 strikeouts. He's got career highs with 17 homers, 5 triples, and 21 doubles while playing in a career-high 101 game. So far, he's coming back soon from a right hamstring strain. Here's what stands out to me is that Riley Green's walk rate has improved from 8.4% in 2023 to 11.9% in 2024, which ranks 13th among 140 qualified hitters. We've also talked about WRC+. His WRC+ is 135. The entire season, that ranks 19th among that same group of 140 hitters. Truly a special player who seems to have improved his play discipline over the last year. He's the heart and soul of the Tigers, especially on offense. Nate, from your vantage point with Process Plus, what do you know about Riley Green? And is there more to his game? Is there MVP potential here? Are we looking at? Or is this guy maybe just an all-star who's going to continue to be an all-star, but maybe never get to that MVP caliber performance? What do you think based on Process Plus?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully see MVP level, but I definitely see perennial all-star. He made significant jumps in his decision-making from last year to this year and has paired that with similarly good contact and power abilities, which is really great to see. But one of the neat things about Process Plus is we break it out on a rolling 400 pitches faced. So you can kind of see the trends throughout the season. And he never really kind of got to the high highs that you see from a lot of the elite hitters or even the Kyle Schwarbers of the world who are good but very streaky. So it seems like he's just kind of going to plateau at very, very good. And that's not a bad thing. But I don't see the necessarily MVP ceiling that maybe a lot of people hope.
I'll take very, very good every day of the week. The last guy we got to ask you about, because Mark loves him so very much, Matt Vierling. I'm cautiously optimistic about Matt Vierling as an everyday player, even though he probably fits better as a bench player. What I do know is that he set a career high in home runs, he's tied a career high in triples, and he's one double away from tying his career high in doubles with only 105 games played so far. His WRC plus is 103, so he's performing 3% above league average. He's a below average third baseman, but he's fine everywhere in the outfield. He's launched 14 home runs in 105 games for hitting just 10 home runs in 134 games last year. He's finally found a way to tap into his power, all of it to the pull side with a swing adjustment to his mechanics. Mark is not the biggest fan of Matt Vierling. I think that's well known. But what does Process Plus tell you about Matt Vierling? And does Mark need to get on the Matt Vierling bandwagon moving forward?
I think he might. Matt Vierling's got a 108 Process Plus, which is better than his 103 WRC Plus. But I think that comes from he makes good decisions and good contact and not much power. And power is the most important in creating runs, which Process Plus is based off of. So when you're hitting in that ballpark and not hitting for power, you definitely can see an overperformance in Process Plus compared to WRC Plus. However, looking back on last year, he definitely has improved his swing decisions and has kept a relatively stable amount of contact. And the power has been what's fluctuated throughout his 2 years. So I think he's got, a second division starter role. That's kind of seemingly who he is as a player. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to have, but obviously you want to have a lineup where he can hit 7, 8, 9 and fit in and not necessarily be someone you need to rely upon.
Thank you. You have proved my point. All right, I got a couple questions and then we're going to get out of here. First, I'd like to touch on, this seems like a metric if fans don't understand this part of it, that teams probably have tapped into before you guys have now made it into the public venue with it. Thank goodness. So all the people like Evan and I can take a look at these things. But it seems like a metric that teams probably have their own version of. I want you to comment on that. And while we're at it, just so fans can understand how it translates, tell us who maybe the top 2 or 3 Process Plus guys are in baseball this year, and let's see how it translates to WRC Plus or other things, because obviously it's pretty easy to know who the best hitters in baseball are, and I'm curious how that's translated.
Yeah, so first, I think teams definitely have been working on developing similar statistics. I know, obviously, with all of the pitching development and pitching labs that you've heard of over the last several years, I think teams are finally trying to figure out how to kind of work back on that, as everyone has a pitching lab and everyone's creating, super relievers and super starters. Like, how do you combat that? By delving into the hitting side of things and finding ways to make swing decisions better and emphasize, important characteristics for certain players on whether it's making contact or hitting for additional power. I think teams have definitely started to look into this. And I think, finding decision value is the most important thing, because I think even just in public facing stats, it's somewhat easier to kind of quantify the exit velocities and whiff rates and stuff like that, as those are pretty straightforward, but actually getting into the mind of the hitter. What are they deciding to do? Baseball's always been a game of cat and mouse. And if you can determine what the hitter is doing and the way the pitcher reacts, I think that is very, very valuable information. And I'm sure teams, all sorts of them, have metrics like that. As in terms of who is the leaders of Process Plus, it should be unsurprising to you that it's Juan Soto with a 159 and Aaron Judge with a 155. So, over 50% better than league average. Rounding out the top 5 is Ohtani at 147, and then Marcell Ozuna and Vlad Guerrero Jr. at 140 each. It's really interesting to see, looking at their rolling charts. outside of Aaron Judge, who obviously struggled early in the year, these guys they make good decisions, they make good contact, they make good power. And watching them, they're all guys where you don't see a flaw in their game when they step up to the plate. On the team scale, the Yankees lead baseball, which makes sense with the two best hitters on their team. And I will mention that the Tigers rank 17th with a 98 total process plus. They make solid decisions, which can be seen kind of across the board, but then struggle in making contact and power.
All right, Nate, I think that's all we have for you today, but we really appreciate your time and insight about Process Plus, a new hitting stat from PitcherList. Hopefully we can have you back on the podcast in the future to take a look at Process Plus as the sample size continues to grow with a lot of these young players in the Tigers lineup, both metrically and also based on the eye test too. So I'm going to ask and put you on the spot. Can we pencil you in for a future appearance on the pod?
Absolutely. Loved being on and would definitely like to come back to check up on some of these guys.
Awesome. We're already looking forward to it, man.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Nate.
Everyone, that was Nate Schwartz, one of our new favorites from PitcherList, along with the great Nick Pollock, who we need to get back on the podcast soon to help us break down Tarek Skubal's Cy Young campaign. Anyway, there's more to discuss about this past week for the Tigers, but first, let's take a break.
All right, we're back. I hope everybody enjoyed Nate Schwartz. I mean, look, here's what Evan and I like to try to do every week. Everybody likes to talk about the regular stuff, who's good, who's bad. We never really talk about the process of why who's good or who's bad. This is a metric that tries to bring to the casual fan, why do guys swing and why are their outcomes good and why are they bad? And also, you're going to be able to apply this eventually to counts. So why are guys good swinging at the first pitch? Why are their swing decisions good? We at Days of Roar like to try and understand why things happen. Who's good at thinking the game and then applying good thoughts to being a good player? Or why bad thoughts are making them a bad player? It's a little bit more of, oh, this guy sucked. You know, it gets tiring talking about it 52 weeks out of the year. I want to know why a guy was good or why he sucked. And that's what Evan and I try to do. Sometimes it's a little complicated. Sometimes it's fun. If you get one thing or one small reason why players are good or bad, that's really what we're trying to accomplish. And hopefully we give you a place to go look for it. All right, we're going to get into rapid fire, close this one up. Ev, one of Days of Roar's favorite players of 2024, Wenceel Pérez, landed on the injured list with a left oblique strain. Think he's coming back this year, or is that it for him?
Yeah, it's really tough timing for Wenceel Pérez, somebody who started off really hot and then obviously has fallen off as of late. But again, a guy who comes up with some big hits in some clutch situations. So yeah, he suffered a left oblique strain in Friday's game against the San Francisco Giants, and he could miss the remainder of his rookie season. The Tigers hadn't ruled him out, but also manager AJ Hinch didn't guarantee Pérez would return before the September 29th season finale. Here's the quote from AJ Hinch. Quote, "I don't know how long it's going to be or what we can salvage from the season. We'll do our best to get him healthy and hopefully get him back in some games before the end of the year." End quote. Doesn't sound like a guarantee that Wenceel Pérez is going to be back. Switch hitter on the 10-day injured list, left oblique strain. Those obliques are so tricky. They can be tough to come back from. And look, the Tigers have 43 games left in the 2024 season. Is it worth it to push it and risk a re-injury? I'm not so sure about that. I think it could be nice, though, to rehab him and maybe get him in some games with AAA Toledo before the season ends. That might be a good way to do it, just so that he can go into his offseason confident that he's healthy and ready to attack the offseason in preparation for spring training. But I'm not so sure that we're going to see him back in a Tigers uniform. If it's a grade 1 strain, maybe we see him back. But if it's grade 2 or grade 3, you got to think he's going to be out for the rest of the year, which is a real bummer for a guy that burst onto the scene and, like I said earlier, established himself as somebody who can be a utility player at worst. And we'll see if he can ever develop into an everyday player, but this is a guy who can be a valuable switch hitter off the bench and can do some things defensively in the outfield. We've seen him mature and grow a lot since the beginning of the season. Hat tip to Wenceel Pérez for his rookie season. Hopefully it's not over yet, but it might just be.
Well, it's a type of injury that's typically, even at its mildest, is, like a 15 to 25 day type of injury. So it'll be a stretch to get him back sort of healthy before the end of the year. Heck, I hope Toledo's still playing by the time he can rehab. So that'll be an interesting thing. And Wenceel's been really quite good most of the time. He's had his rookie struggles about some things. And I'll be extremely interested to see if next spring training, obviously during the offseason, quite a bit in Lakeland, if they don't try to work at least a little bit to see if they can correct his throwing yips on the infield, because it'd be really nice if he could play a few games on the infield just to optimize his usage for next year. It's not a requirement. It'd be a bonus, though. And it's not like he hasn't played infield for the first 6 years of his Tiger minor league career. So it's not like anything he's not capable of. Just doesn't seem to throw very accurately right now. And hopefully it's something they can correct. I mean, it would definitely be helpful. Don't you think so, Ev?
It's funny you mentioned that, because you and I are actually maybe thinking on the same brainwave there. I talked to AJ Hinch about that before the Tigers left for their road trip. He had mentioned Wenceel Pérez maybe playing center field on the road trip at some point, which he ended up doing, playing in center field on the day that he actually got hurt. But still, I asked him when he kind of hinted that they were going to move him around a little bit. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? Are you thinking about maybe moving him back into the infield? Because that would make some sense. As a guy who had played there in the past, might be a utility bat off the bench and could play everywhere. That could be an interesting, way to get the most out of him. And AJ had said, no, they're going to stick to the outfield for the rest of the year. But it didn't seem like he was really closing the door on infield being opened back up at some point into the future. I think we're right on the money there. I think that makes a ton of sense to bring him into spring training with a plan of having him play the infield again. And again, it doesn't have to be all the time, but to have that as an option for you, he could be your better version of Zach McKinstry, essentially, right? And how valuable would that be? Sure, maybe he can't play shortstop, but you know what? If he could play second base and third base, and he could play all three outfield positions, Wenceel Pérez becomes a very valuable player, even more so than he is right now. And he doesn't have to hit 270, 280, 290. He can hit 250 and be somebody that plays all over the place, comes off the bench and switch hit. It's a great recipe for success. I'd love to see them add infield back in his profile. It's a great suggestion, Mark.
I think they're going to try. I just don't know if we'll ever, we'll know, because if he's playing the infield, we'll know that they've corrected it. I expect to see it next spring training, whether they've corrected it or not. But yeah, something to watch. All right, I want to talk about the fallacy of bullpen games, because as mad as I was getting that they're starting a bullpen game 3 times a week, in reality, maybe they're not, because the way it's shaken out the last 2 times through the rotation, it seems like guys they brought up from Toledo are throwing 4 to 6 innings once there's been an opener, a la Tampa Bay 2020. So why don't you give me your 2 cents on that one?
Yeah, I mean, look, 2 starting pitchers in the rotation, 3 long guys in the bullpen. They've navigated these so-called bullpen games with essentially 5 starting pitchers. Just 2 of them are actual starting pitchers, and then the other 3 are coming out of the bullpen. So yes, technically it is still a 2-man rotation and an 11-man bullpen, but Brant Herter, Kenta Maeda, and Brian Sammons are the long guys in the bullpen who have been starters in the past, who are acting kind of like starters coming out of the bullpen. Sometimes it's 4 innings, sometimes it's 5 innings, sometimes it's 6 innings. Brian Sammons gave them more than 7 innings in his first, appearance that he had in his big league debut. So there's been a little bit of that. That's how they've navigated it and gotten through it. Look, it's fine. It is what it is. I would love for them to have an actual rotation again. I think they get a little bit closer to that when Casey Mize comes back. We'll see if Reese Olson is able to come back. He hasn't been throwing bullpens yet, so we'll see how long that takes for him to come back, and if he even comes back at any point in the 2024 season. I know he feels like he can. Reese Olson believes that he'll be back, but who knows? Yeah, it's been Brant Herter, Kenta Maeda, Brian Sammons, Kiter Montero, and obviously the ace, Tarek Skubal, leading the way for the pitching staff when it comes to the bulk of the innings, with only 2 of those guys actually getting starts in Skubal and Montero. It's an interesting strategy. I don't love it. It's not sexy, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. Herter's kind of interesting. I think he will more likely than not be in the Wentz role next year. I see some upside for him, especially as a bullpen piece, if he can continue to polish his command. He's looked good a few times. He interests me a little. He's done better than I actually thought he would do, because besides his last start in Toledo, he had been horrendous for about a month, but he's been pretty good here. All right. We have made kind of a weekly check-in on our close friend, Spencer Torkelson. So give us the Torque update. Do you think we're seeing him, or do you think we're not seeing him?
Yeah, I don't know if we're seeing him just yet. The strikeout problems are real. It's an issue. This past week, 6 games he played for AAA Toledo. He hit .208 with a .667 OPS. He had 5 walks, which was good, but 10 strikeouts in 30 plate appearances in those 6 games. No home runs. He had 3 doubles. But again, .208 with 10 strikeouts in 30 plate appearances over 6 games. That was his line. I'm not loving it. Again, you got to cut down on these strikeouts. That's been the real issue for him. The Tigers have talked about it, and it's something that it's been plaguing him in Toledo. You look at his numbers and what he's done across the board, the strikeout rate is not good. Strikeout rate is no good. And while he has gotten better, the baseline performance, strikeouts are an issue. 80 strikeouts, 55 games. It's a lot of strikeouts. So again, I don't know. We'll see what he ends up being. I don't think he's coming back up anytime soon. Hopefully we can see him in September. But at that point, if you're not going to call him up until September, you might as well just punt on the rest of the season, because again, I think a bad 4 weeks of September could be a real dagger both for Torkelson and for the Tigers. But again, you got to find out at some point, and you don't want to find out early in the 2025 season when, you know, those wins are going to count more than these wins are going to count with where the Tigers are at in the standings at this point. So Carlos Monarrez went down to Toledo. Carlos from the Detroit Free Press went down and talked to Torkelson. He's got a story on Freep.com with Torkelson's comments about what he's been working on, what's changed, what's been different as he's been able to, you know, battle out of the slump that he had in Toledo recently. Obviously, this last week wasn't great, but the 2 or 3 weeks before that were really, really solid for Spencer Torkelson. You can read that at Freep.com. As for me, I don't think Spencer Torkelson is coming back, not until September, maybe not until 2025.
All right. My short answer is, if he's not coming back soon, he's not coming back ever. And when I say ever, I mean ever. So, quick, give me 2 minutes. You wrote a great piece on Kevin McGonigal. Give me 2 minutes.
Obviously, we know Kevin McGonigal knows what he's doing with the bat. It's a bat-first player who plays some shortstop, also plays some second base. He's playing more shortstop right now, but the thought is that he's going to eventually move to second base because arm isn't very strong. He talked about that quite a bit. He talked about some of the work that he's putting in. You got to go to Freep.com to read about it, but Kevin McGonigal believes he can stick at shortstop, but also he knows that it's going to take a lot of work to stick at shortstop too. He's not calling it a slam dunk. He's calling it a dream to play shortstop in the big leagues. And he's also saying that he knows that he's got to put in a lot of work to improve his arm if he wants to stick at shortstop. So he knows the task at hand is to improve his arm strength, improve the carry on the ball, going across from shortstop to first base on his throws. If he can do that, he feels like he has a good chance of sticking at shortstop. If not, second base is probably where he ends up. The Tigers have a lot of second basemen. They also have a lot of first basemen. They also have a lot of DHs. They don't have a lot of third basemen or shortstops in their organization. Hopefully Kevin McGonigal can be an answer, but I'm not so sure it's going to be him. I think Bryce Rayner is more of the answer for them when it comes to shortstop, but the bat is real with Kevin McGonigal. He's super advanced. When he was in Lakeland, played in 60 games, he hit .326 with 4 home runs, 35 walks, and 24 strikeouts. He had a 92.4% in-zone contact rate and an 11.4% whiff rate. So basically, he's making contact on fastballs. He's not chasing secondary pitches. He's doing damage when he wants to swing in the zone. Kevin McGonigal is the real deal with the bat. Like I said, the big question is going to be, is he a shortstop or is he a second baseman? He's probably a second baseman, but maybe there's a slim chance he can stick at shortstop. We'll see in the long term.
He can rake. He may be even more advanced as a hitter than Riley Green was. And Riley Green obviously was probably the best hitting prospect since Al Kaline, to be really blunt about it. So Kevin McGonigal can really, really hit the baseball. Be interesting to see if he's able to improve his defense. Probably see him 2026. Excited to see it. Maybe start the year at Erie next year. All right, it's time for us to get out of here. I'd like to remind everybody to rate, share, and subscribe wherever they listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, the Ethos, anywhere. You can always find us embedded in every Evan Petzold article at thefreep.com. As always, we're pretty much giving digital subscriptions away, so check on that. I'd like to thank our Free Press editor, Nicole Avery-Nichols, our producer, the man who always makes us sound good. We made work overtime this week, the magic man, Robin Chan. Love to my grandson, Braden Michael Gorash. And shout out, as always, to the beautiful Savannah Petzold. Till next week, peace!